to me, it's an interesting idea. This of building next to the manor house, a building which is actually very simple and quite restrained. But as you move from the gardens of the house, you move into the courtyard, and then you move into the space of the building. So I like that principle, the way the building is organised.
Yeah, and I believe the manor house was very important in the planning process. It was actually central. I'm quite interested in the bricks as well, and the fact that they've gone for an English garden wall bond. And of course it's a very traditional brick, being a traditional clamp-fired brick. The brickwork detailing is pretty good, with queen closers and some corbelling, and inside the long straight lines of this, there's, I think, some very interesting detail.
Yeah, it's an interesting project because it's an extension, or a series of extensions to the existing building, and obviously they've used a brick which is an equivalent brick to the brick that was used on the original building. I think what's very nice is the way that the classrooms have been articulated, these series of classroom blocks, which then have this much bigger scale, with the classrooms on the first floor having more balconies. And that device seems to me to be one of the main ways in which this new building has an equivalence to the much bigger scale of the old building to which it connects to. So I think it's a very successful way of making that transition between the two.
So the brick is a pretty good match for the existing building then?
Yeah, I think it's been well chosen. I mean, once they set out to do that, as it were.
Yeah, but what's more interesting is the modelling, isn't it? The way it does step down.
Yeah, the way these big openings for the upper floor classrooms.
Yeah.
And I mean, it feels, even though it's at a different angle to the street, it feels as if it's addressing the street, which I think is probably the cleverest thing about the organisation.
Yes, and this is a rear elevation, and yet it's by no means subservient, is it?
Yeah,
it's interesting.
It does feel good.
The only criticism I would have, which is, I think, one you mentioned earlier, is I think it's always better to have the cross joints narrower than the bed joints. And normally in a perfect brickwork you'd be looking for 6 mil in the cross joints, and these joints are quite good.
They are.
They may be detailed, but
I feel
it
that
does distract.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting seeing brick used in buildings of this scale and of this density. I mean, this is an 8-storey lower part of the building rising to 17 stories on the tower. It's really quite unusual. But I mean, I think it's actually, when you want a building, it's going to be here a long time, this building. That sense of kind of durability is a very good thing. And in a way, this facade is less brick because it has all these winter gardens, which all the flats have, which is also an interesting aspect of the scheme, I think.
Well, I do like the juxtaposition. This glazing, the wooden shuttering, the cladding further up, and the brickwork. I think it does go together quite well. It gives, certainly, to the basic block forms of the building, it actually does give an interest.
Well, whether they're there because of noise in the end, because it's quite, normally it's the sort of thing you might do where you're feeling there's a lot of traffic. Yeah, I mean, actually what is true also is that this is it's a building type which is a very current one, building at quite high density, housing at quite high density, building it above shops and supermarkets and things on the ground floor, and therefore the building having quite a big scale, and then having to find a way of dealing with that scale. Which I think
the interesting thing, I think that's where the brickworks is actually a link back to an earlier, more traditional building type, which is still, gives a passing notice to earlier buildings, really, and the buildings of this area, and I think the brick does link it in, because it's not so far away, in colour at least, to a traditional stockless building, these bricks.
very interesting. On a project of this scale, it's a very common thing where you want to build residential buildings that face onto the street at ground level. What they've done is they made these duplex flats with their own front door, but then you have a problem of privacy and the relationship to the pavement, and so they pull back the front of the flat, as it were, to create these little kind of garden spaces, and just hold back what I presume is a living room back from the street itself. And I think it's, you know, it's quite a successful.
It's quite successful, isn't it?
They've broken it up into these notches, and then there are slots that make you see into. You can tell there's a garden up there. I mean, when the garden matures, you see trees and things there. That'll be very nice.
I quite like looking back there and seeing the slightly reduced penthouse areas. Otherwise, to give a slight ziggurat, moderate the top of the building. I'm not sure I'm that keen on the, no doubt it's correct, but on the cobbled edge, brick on edge at the top.
Okay.
It gives quite a deep shadowing. It seems quite heavy.
This is a really beautifully composed facade. I think it's really elegantly designed, and the brick is really just a very simple surface into which the windows are carved. And the brick itself, of course, is also a very beautiful brick, very pale colour, reflecting the light beautifully today. And interesting the way they use the mortar with the brick, so it's actually a very continuous surface. The difference between the mortar and the brick is hardly visible. So it's a very, it's thoughtfully built, but I mean really elegantly designed.
I think that's interesting, and I think the mortar and the brick, the mortar joints are much wider than that you would normally see, and it works so well with this brick. And of course with this base, which is a very busy street, and a reasonably rugged area, they have a much harder glue with their recessed joint, so they haven't slavishly followed this mortar choice above. They've got two different bricks and two different pointing alternatives.
It's an interesting building because it's an office and a home. So it has flats in it, and also people working in it. So it's a mixed-use building right in the centre of London, but obviously making very successful spaces as well as what it contributes back to the street.
The great thing about this building is that whilst it is incredibly elegant and beautiful, actually the area is not so beautiful, and what the brick does is it makes an attachment. This very beautiful brick that's been chosen makes a strong attachment to the surroundings in the area, and it makes it very, very relevant. I also like the way that the building works, that as we get higher and higher it gets lighter and lighter, until finally on the top here we're on this beautiful sun terrace with really fantastic views, just a stone's throw away from one of the financial capitals of the world. Well, I think obviously the most striking thing when one first looks at the building is the blend of the bricks. And it's obviously a very large building, and yet the blend breaks it up to become much more manageable and human.
Yes, it definitely, with the balconies as well, with the decorated still on the balconies against the brickwork. It's quite a combination of colours.
I seem to remember the balcony is actually made by a sculpture from some local ironwork found on the site, actually.
Right.
But the other thing is this very interesting space in between the two buildings, in between both of them, and of course inside there is a very private courtyard, a bit not miles away from Oxbridge Quadrangle, which is quite a secret space actually. The other thing you pointed out, Sarah, the way they've put in the movement joints.
Yes, quite subtle.
In the side of the window. But I think the overwhelming impression is the fact they've broken down this fairly massive building by the articulation of the balconies, the articulation of the building, the deep reveals which give light and shade, and the blend of the bricks.
Brick by brick.
The interesting thing is here how well this space works.
Yeah.
I have to say I prefer the bricks in the shadow here to the bricks in the sunlight, which one wouldn't normally say. But the amazing thing about this space is this is owned and protected. People are obviously happy to allow their children to play here unsupervised. You can see people who've got garden furniture out, obviously they feel safe. You've got the tradition of the cross passage route running through it. You've got routes out, and yet it's completely safe. In this space you've got the best of all worlds. And I think if you were to draw this up in plan and elevation, you might be concerned with the fact that it might appear to be too dark. And yet the reality is that this is actually flooded with light, this space. And it clearly works very well. So we've got the private space here, and then adjoining the street, which connects to the city in a traditional way.
And heavily populated by the
Heavily
children.
populated. I mean, this is actually being used. It's an oasis in the middle of the city. Well, this is a very clever building. It's taken a product which simulates tile hanging, and they've built the whole building out of it. And what's very interesting is the fact that they've used this blue brick, which is very dark, and round on the other side they've actually got the white facade with a balcony, and the two look great together. The interesting thing about this is that there's very little opportunity for adjustment, so the building has to build exactly, because you don't have a normal 10mm gap between the joints. So every brick here had to be pre-drawn and pre-worked out in this situation. Do you find this an interesting building?
Yeah, I think it's just rather a sweet building, really. I think it's quite a small, something about the scale of it, because of the use of the brick in this way, changes your feeling about the building. And the surface of the building also is very, it is unusual and intriguing when you see it. So it has a different quality to a brick
And of course
wall.
it's mortarless. You see no mortar at the face of it. So it is quite an unusual building, and they've taken quite a gamble in doing the building out of this material. And I think it's pretty successful.
Brick by brick.
It's a great little building actually, because it's on such a tiny site, and because the site's so small and the buildings have to exactly follow the geometry of the site, it's really this one long curving wall which then meets the other street. And it's exactly the sort of infill urban building you want, and then in a way to use this brick, which is very unusual clearly, nevertheless seems right to me in this kind of gritty context of the other buildings that surround it.
It is a very hard brick. It's a very hard wearing brick, and it's very colourful. And again, they've used a blend, so it's a mixture, and that's quite a subtle mixture of a mixture of colours: the green, the copper, and the slight brown. And it's not going to change this building. It's not going to weather. It's a hard ceramic surface, and it will look much the same now as it will in 20 years' time.
Yeah. And it is actually beautifully done, isn't it? I mean, the surface is
beautifully
actually
done,
very good as it follows around the sweep of the curve.
It's well laid. The workmanship's
done.
pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was easy to do. No, it's an impressive building. And as you say, again, a very urban building.
Yeah, a good building for its site, I think.
Yeah, responding to the site.
Brick by